Deborah, Deborah's our special guest this week. She runs and indeed founded TEN2TWO about 14 years ago, when she came to a crossroads in her life. Deborah, welcome. How did it all start? Where did it begin?
Oh, 14 years ago seems a long time, and things have changed really significantly. It all started, my background is a marketing background. I was sort of senior manager at BT, did that for 17 years and then had my first child. And that was the beginning of the crossroads. So the crossroads wasn't an immediate, oh, let's change. It was a, whoa, can I keep doing what I was doing? Traveling across the country, going abroad, working all hours. Now I had a little person to care for. So I carried on and then did it till I had my second, and then thought, wow, this is actually very challenging. So for me, it was the point in my life when I thought, okay, I need to do something different. So I left, and by that time, my first was at school. And for those hands up, who has children? Yeah, I can't see everybody. Yeah, it's a massive change. It's a crossroads in itself. But standing in the school playground, having wonderful discussions with wonderful, mainly females. I realised, there's all these brilliant accountants, events managers, lawyers, all really would like to work. And at the time, 14 years ago, there was literally, it was just impossible virtually to find a professional job with flexibility. And so TEN2TWO was born. My husband and I just said, we already had some links into companies. We did a bit of research, and we ended up saying, actually, we think there is a matching opportunity here. And at the time, we actually didn't realise we were getting into recruitment. It sounds really naive, but we genuinely just thought, there's all this brilliant talent. Let's match it with some brilliant businesses, and that's how it started.
So, with your husband?
Yes. John.
What strikes me here, Deborah, is there's so many parallels with your journey and E2W's journey. As you know, ours started a few years ago, 20 odd years ago, when we had that same moment. Tina was looking to get her professional career back after a short break. I was traveling all over the world, and not being the type of father or husband I wanted to be. We looked for flexible and agile working. We looked for that solution, couldn't find one, and E2W was born out of a consequence of that, sometimes out of adversity, which I think we'll talk about later in connection with the pandemic, comes innovation and change. So well done. So how did you get going? And 14 years is quite a journey in this world. What's changed in those times?
I mean, it's interesting because I'd love to say absolutely loads, and then in some respects not very much. Certainly 14 years ago, you'd talk to a client and you'd say, have you considered this job part-time, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, or with some remote working, and they'd look at you like you have 3 heads. It's like, no, why would I do that? And equally, we'd talk to candidates and they'd be saying, do you think I could get just a few hours off so I could have a Friday afternoon? So there was a sort of ignorance about it from a client perspective, and then candidates were very hesitant. And then what we've seen over those 14 years is there's been a massive drive from all sorts of directions, governments, lots of people like you and I, Mark, setting up businesses, and a push internally from candidates and employees in businesses, pushing and driving change. So now it isn't like that. It's not the dark ages anymore, but pre-pandemic, we would still be having conversations with clients about, could it have 1 day at home? Could it perhaps be 30 hours rather than 40 hours? And lots of clients were still going, oh, no, we don't do that. So saying that, we've got a brilliant roster of clients who are absolutely embracing flexible working and have done for 10 years plus. And they have seen all the benefits that come from that. They love their staff, they see productivity, they see loyalty, and they get a talent pool, a different talent pool, highly skilled, really experienced. So the clients who get it really get it. And I mean, I know we work with slightly different clients, but our clients tend to be small, medium enterprises. And they definitely, for me, they get it quicker and they can adopt it quicker because they are generally more agile. So you have a conversation with small, medium enterprise and they go, oh, yeah, right. So I could get someone with 15 years experience for the same price 3 days a week as maybe a grad with 2 years experience. And all of a sudden the penny drops and they get it. They see how it can enhance their workforce. And then, of course, we've got the pandemic, which has thrown the whole thing up in the air.
But I'm going to just bring a few people in here. So, Kate, I'm going to pick on you. Sorry about this. Kate's one of our team, by the way. Presumably, flexible and agile working for you, Kate, means not only a fantastic employer, TEN2TWO, but going out for bike rides in the middle of the day. You're on mute, Kate.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, it is great because, I mean, I've got 2 children and whilst they are a little bit older now, you still have got that time to sort of be there when they get home. Like Mark said, have my bike rides if I want to. But, you know, give a good service when you are working. It works really well. I'm, yeah, definitely a fan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And Jennifer and Raggy, you talked about looking for flexible and agile working. Why are you looking for it? What's your stories, and how have you found the market?
So me personally, I left my job in April 2019, so just over 2 years now. The reason I left, so my children are 3 and 5, so quite young. I come from an investment banking background where they just didn't get it. So, you know, you'd say, you know, I want to be home for my kids. I want to, you know, I was dropping at nursery every day, you know, dropping them 7:30 in the morning and then picking them up at 6 o'clock at night. So the travel as well was quite you know, it's quite long, an hour a day into London and then an hour back. It was quite tough. And yeah, it's just a lack of understanding from the employer. So that was the reason I left. And it's now just trying to find, I guess, the next steps to find an employer that will understand and give the flexibility that you are willing to do the hours, just a little differently.
So I was with NatWest and I was working there part-time. So I've got 2 young kids as well, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So it was like, you know, breakfast club and after school club, and then trying to balance juggling them and working. But I mean, the bank was really good and allowed me to have that flexibility. But now going forward, I think, you know, I'm applying for full-time jobs. And what I'm thinking is, once I you know, something happens and progresses, I want to have a discussion then afterwards. I'm not necessarily just looking for roles that are labeled part-time. So that's been the approach I've kind of taking at the moment.
Brilliant.
Just to, I guess, represent the members that don't have children as well. For me personally, flexibility, obviously I don't have children, but it's a great relief to know that, you know, that we do also have bits and pieces that need doing, you know, whether we have to quickly pop to the post office or, you know, do the washing, whatever. There's stuff that, you know, it's great for us to have that level of flexibility as well. As Kate said, going for a walk, going for a bike ride, you know, focused on bits and pieces that we do as well. So I think that's massively that the pandemic has kind of shone light on the flexibility for, you know, people without children as well.
And I would say, Katie, just to endorse that, the change over the time we've been in business has been exactly that, where there's many more men looking for flexibility. Our base used to be almost exclusively female. There's many more younger people, and it could be for all sorts of reasons, as you say, to give some breaks in your actual life. But things like caring responsibilities for elderly relatives, horses is a big one, actually, dogs, there's all sorts of reasons that people, and actually, I think your generation don't want to be chained to a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 job anymore. It's just not modern.
I think as well, if employers give you a lot more flexibility, I just think they get a lot more back from their workers. You're more committed, and because you're happier, and I think it's all round better for everybody.
Thanks, Kate. Deborah, how would you respond to Raggy? Sorry, Raggy, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are. Okay. I would have corrected you. Don't worry.
Thank you. With the strategy of get in and then negotiate afterwards.
It's a really common question that we get asked. My view is to check out the company you're applying for, check out their whatever they've got published on their attitudes towards flexibility, just because it gives you a bit of an insight into whether you're going to be pushing against a closed door. And my view is that it's absolutely fine to go for a job full-time with a view to thinking you might then ask for some flexibility if you can offer full-time. So there's really nothing worse from a hiring manager's perspective, having somebody go through a process, get an offer and go, actually, can I just do 2.5 days a week? So my view is if you can do 30 hours plus, it's fine to go for a full-time job and then have a negotiation. And I've seen that work really quite successfully. If you really haven't got anywhere close to full-time, then I think it could damage your reputation doing it that way. Would you agree, Mark?
Yeah. So I think I agree. You have to be careful. I think unfortunately in financial services, particularly investment banking and asset management, it might say we're open to flexible working in the small print on the job description, but I think that's more HR than reality in many cases.
I think that's one of the big areas for me. I mean, we'll probably talk about it later on in the conversation, but there is this whole thing about what does flexibility mean and how is it communicated throughout an organisation, that it can't just be one person in HR going, we really should offer some flexibility here, if it's not practiced and role modelled within the organisation.
Yeah. And particularly role models. I remember I was at the launch of the Women in Finance Charter probably 4 years ago, and a lady stood up, I've forgotten her name, but I think she was from Barclays, and announced that she was one of the most senior people on working 3 days a week. And yes, and then she said, I only get paid for 3, but I work 5. And you think, no, role model it, do it, you're living the dream, and then you ruin it anyway. Brilliant. Listen, so everybody out there, if you want to interrupt, please just come off mute and shout, or if you want to put your hand up, I can bring you in, or drop things in the chat, and we'll pick them up. Brilliant. This year, or this last 12 months, has completely changed the landscape. What are your thoughts on that? Where are we going? Where are we heading?
So I think, going back to our earlier conversation, the last year has, in many respects, moved companies. I think it's moved companies on 10 years in the space of one, would be my if I had to summarize it. And I think it's most obvious from a technology point of view, because you can see companies adopting and behaving using technology in ways it would have taken them numerous projects to get through, and loads of big decisions about investment, IT investment, and all of a sudden, virtually overnight, companies have adopted that sort of thing. And then I think you've seen the same with people and the people policies. So the move to, you know, loads of organisations going to 100% remote working literally overnight has changed people's attitudes, and there's some really big positives there. I think we are more human. You know, if you remember how that clip of the person on the BBC News went viral with a little kid and the nanny, and everyone was almost shocked, but it was shocking because it was so different. Whereas now, you know, people are used to seeing people's bedrooms or living rooms in the background and the odd cat or child shouting. You know, so I think that's a real plus point. I think companies have learned that they can be responsive and adaptive, which is, again, great. I worry slightly that you've got some quite big decision making going on during what is still the pandemic. You know, we are not anywhere close to normal, I don't believe. So I think you've got companies making property decisions, people decisions, location decisions, without truly understanding the other side of it. And you know, if you look at all the research and the commentary, what you're finding is companies were saying one thing 6 months ago, and then 6 months on are saying something slightly different. So I think it's going to be a bit of a journey. And I think that the technology thing is going to be a journey too, because people had to react quickly. So I think you're going to have these two strands of activity as a result of the pandemic, which is, okay, we did this in the pandemic. Is it right? Should we carry on? What adaptations do we need to make? And I think the same will carry on with IT. For me, it's positive. You know, if overall, I think it's positive, but there's a few warning signs. I would be, as a business leader or as a decision maker in business, I think there's some warning signs to look out for. And I'm sure, you know, most people might, even if you're in the workplace, you might be seeing this now. But you've got companies seeing productivity remaining high, and they will have saved money. If not now, their balance sheet will project that they will save money if they cut costs on property. And the big question for me is that sustainable? People working from home, there is evidence to suggest they work far more hours, that they take fewer breaks, that they don't do that distancing from the workplace, which is important for everybody's mental health. So for me, there's a big alarm bell, which is saying unless that is taken as importantly as saving money on property, then that's could be something looming in the distance that we don't want.
That's I think is summed up by the words living at work. Yeah. Does anybody feel that, or got examples of living at work that they can would like to share?
I don't know if this is like a good example of living at work, but I just think the fact that obviously if you're based in the UK, like we also have had extended lockdown, so it's almost like you're like, oh, I might as well do it because I can't do anything else, and there's nothing else. Which, you know, I know it's changing now. Like already, like I have a couple of plans to meet friends outdoors, so I'm kind of like, you know what, I'm logging off at 6 because I have plans now. But I think like because we had 3, 4, 5 months of, you know, basically full on lockdowns, you just have nothing. I know you have stuff to do, but you know, you're just harder to be like, I'll disconnect because there's no plan to get to. There's no thing. Whereas like before, I feel like I had gym classes at 6, so I would leave because I had to go to my class and I paid, or like I would be getting dinner with a friend, so I just had to leave because like she was at the restaurant, you know, stuff like that, which I think is just gone now because you can ditch Zoom a lot easier.
But is that Shaka, the you know, I didn't have anything to cope with over lockdown. You know, no young family. You you know, sometimes it was a choice of continuing to work or Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah. And quite frankly, continuing to work was more exciting than a lot of the films on Netflix. So I kind of chose that. I agree with you now. Now things are opening up. It's sort of, there are more options that we've got, you know, whether that's the gym, the pub, the restaurant, friends, or getting on with life. But do you feel, I know a lot of people I spoke to early in lockdown were saying their team, the team that they worked with, had constant Zooms on. So you almost felt guilty, you know, if you walked away from your desk to go and make a cup of tea, somebody would look at the Zoom screen and say, "Oh, Shalka's not there anymore." Have you had that? You know, where's Shalka? She's not at her desk.
No, I've actually had the absolute opposite experience. Like, we don't really use Zoom that much at work. Like, we do video calls more for one-on-one meetings, not always for group, and no one talks about the camera being on. Like, there are group calls where obviously like people keep it on when they're speaking, but it's very relaxed in terms of that. But I also like have a lot of friends in the financial services industry who are definitely having that Zoom on experience. And like, I think the head of our team has also been super vocal about like, hey, I've seen people are working till like 8 p.m. like 3 times a week. I understand sometimes like you need to get stuff done and that's flexibility, but if you're doing it because you're overworked, like you need to tell me. Like, I don't want to tell people how to manage their time, which I thought was really nice, because some days I do like go for a long afternoon walk and then like catch up on stuff later because I just want to do it later. And he was like, that's fine. He was like, I just need to know if it's overwork or choice, and I'm fine if it's choice.
So Deborah, are you seeing that across industries as well?
Yes, I mean, just going back to that point about your manager checking with you, you know, for us, that's one of the conversations we have a lot with clients, which is it's all about transparent communication. We were doing a working from home seminar, and there was one lady, and her boss would send emails between 11 and 1 every night, and she felt she had to answer them because that was her boss and she was asking questions. And when they actually spoke, the boss said, "I'm not expecting you to answer, it's just that's when I like to do my emails." But of course they hadn't spoken, and so that whole checking the whole time about what expectations are, I think, is absolutely crucial. And just to go back to your point, Mark, yes, we are across industries. You're seeing some people using the online tech really well. So, you know, Monday morning check-ins, Friday afternoon, have lovely weekends, and just then as required. And then you've got the absolute, literally Zoom back to back. And whether it's required or not, I'm not sure. But what they know, again, the researcher says, you know, actually video calling is really back to back is really unhealthy. There's a really interesting thing that says that, you know, you wouldn't normally see someone's face that big unless you are in conflict with them or being intimate. So actually that whole thing about if you're every day with loads of people up in your face, it's not healthy. It's not good for your stress levels.
Does anyone feel Deborah, I say I've got your massive face because I've pinned you to my screen, and
Mark, I just want to add something here.
Hi Nidhi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I like this conversation that's happening here, but one of the key findings, which is across industries, is it's very difficult for people to form new habits under new ways of working. And we need to create a fresh culture of these newfound freedoms, dependencies, and co-creation of work through our digital screens that we look at the whole day, because there are no set written rules for it. For example, if I take an example from my husband's employer, told he works for Nationwide, they said to their 13,000 force that you could work from wherever you want forever. And they are selling away, they're getting out of their corporate office lease. But then they dropped the penny for everyone, saying, however you work, if it's a meeting and everybody needs to be on the Zoom call or a digital presence if a single person is there. So putting a democratic equity norm into it, and nobody had anticipated it. So now people are finding it very difficult to put that. If we all go back to visit a situation where everyone goes back to a structural process of attending offices, and if there's still some people who work from home, then they cannot be left out of that office political exercise. So these are new ways of moral justification of how you work and co-create that work with other people in your office. And none of the books, none of the practices have laid down the rules for that. So would like to know, what is Deborah's view on that? Because I myself, I'm writing a piece on new ways of working, where these nuances of how do you work with people, of them not being next to you, span out your career growth, and how does it stop, especially a nuance where women find it increasingly difficult with responsibility of running a house, managing kids, or even not managing kids. If you don't have kids, apologies if I said that, but if you have other responsibilities, or if you have your own choices, but you're seen as a woman who, especially with my ex-employer, if you work from home, people just perceive, she's a woman, like, just discount her off. So I mean, anyone can take this leaf, but would like to know what's Deborah's view on this new nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really, well, it's what you've just described is exactly the problem of the time, and it's not going to go away. As I said, companies have made these sweeping decisions. You can work from home at home forever. Well, what in fact, people don't want to work at home forever. In particular, the youth, there's lots of research that says young people really crave that office environment, the out of hours socializing. That's what embeds them into the culture of your organization. So from an employee experience, there's some really big questions to be answered, and you've asked most of them there, Nidri. I think again, it's a journey. I think what you're going to have is some companies doing this increasingly well and leading the way, and others will really stumble. My view is that big decisions shouldn't be made quickly like this, because we are still in the midst of this. Who knows, this time next year, it might be completely normal again. And you might survey the workforce and actually 70% would rather be in the office than at home because they're sick of being at home. It's different being forced into a situation and you're going, well, actually, I quite like the flexibility, to then becoming the norm. So I think it's a bit like, I remember years ago in BT, we'd have meetings and everybody would be invited and you'd turn up and there wouldn't be a chair and there wouldn't be an agenda. And so there was this big initiative to say, if you called a meeting, then you had to chair it and there had to be an agenda. And it sounds so ridiculous that had to be said, but it did have to be said. And it's a bit like when a company creates their own values. I think the same is required for this new way of working, which is, what is our company's etiquette? Do people have to have cameras on? Is it okay for them to be off? How do we recruit people? What's the onboarding process like? That's the challenge we've been seeing clients having, which is it's quite easy to recruit online. Actually, it's much harder for the candidate, but from a client's perspective, you can pretty much find out everything you need to know about a candidate, make the job offer, get them on side. But that onboarding is really challenging when you've not got physical contact. And all the things that you've just described would be something you'd say to someone joining your company. And yet very few companies have worked that out yet. So I think it's a combination of transparent conversation and looking forward. So not just saying, oh, here and now, everybody tell us what you want. It's tell us what you want now and think forward. If we were back to normal, what would you want? And then putting a structure and policies and processes around that.
Yeah.
How do people think about this, though, Deborah? Because you said 70% of the people might want to go back to full-time in the office. We work in an industry where there's 80% men and 20% women. You also said that the younger generation would want to rush back to the office for all the good reasons that you gave. if we're not careful, we've got that nightmare scenario of the only people working from home are working parents, typically women, and that creates a parallel universe if we're not careful.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a real concern. They've already said the pandemic has hit female employment harder than men. It's another one of those challenges that goes alongside the flexibility. On the upside, I think what you've got is that actually men have now done the working from home. So the thing we used to always struggle with our clients with is that they actually wouldn't trust people to work from home. So they'd say all sorts of reasons why not. But when you really dug down, they didn't think people would do the work. They thought they'd be doing the washing or sit in the garden, or I don't know what they were thinking. So the difference now is everybody knows you can be productive working from home. So I think that's a massive barrier out the way. The problem is exactly what you say. The people most likely to want it will be to fit around other commitments. And more than likely that is carers, and it could be working dads as well, but it's people with other commitments that working from home will suit. So you've got all the issues surrounding that, which is how do those people not miss out on promotion? How do they get their achievements known? And when we did this project with this company that they were relocating, they gave their staff, this was pre-pandemic, but they gave their staff the choice of either being fully remote or hybrid. And they came up with some quite good ideas on how to make sure people weren't excluded. But it takes quite a lot of time and effort. So it was things like quarterly, I'd say mandatory, but they wouldn't be. You'd make them so good people would want to come, but quarterly events where people came, they got to catch up on everybody, on the company, the direction, that there was ways to promote your achievements so that even if you weren't in the office and you could drop that you've just completed your project on time and to budget, there was other ways of doing that through, they were structured mechanisms. But it requires thinking and it requires time and effort. And that's my concern with all of this, is that lots of decisions being made quickly without a lot of thought going into that. And my other fear about it is that people will make decisions and go, right, we've done that, it's a tick, without monitoring whether it's actually working or not. At the moment, our clients are saying, in the main, jobs we're recruiting for are hybrid. So they're using hybrid very freely, and it means all sorts of things to different people. But in the main, they're saying, we don't mind. It's definitely a mix of home and office. And some by that are saying, actually, once a fortnight is fine in the office. And others are saying, oh no, once a week is in the office. So we're seeing that just amongst our small group of clients, that there's this massive difference in what they think hybrid working is.
But and we should, looking back over the last half an hour of talk, it's been a little bit negative, and so there's huge positives here as well, isn't there? And we should think about that opportunity that everybody's got now to work flexibly, to work agilely, to decide when you're on and when you're off. If it suits you to send emails at 11 o'clock at night, send them at 11 o'clock at night. Working dads who want to be part of the home as well.
Absolutely. And I think if I think of the big pluses out of this, it's exactly that. I've seen, and talking to our candidates, that dads have been far more involved than they ever were before in the responsibilities. You go up to the school gates and you see, it used to just be a Friday afternoon, you'd see the dads, and now they're there all the time, lots of them. So you're absolutely right. I think there's some massive wins. And just this, for me, it's so having done this for 14 years and seen it nudge, the journey nudge very slowly, I honestly think it's about 10 years progress in a year, where we have now got everybody talking about flexibility. And what we now need to do is say, what does that mean? and how is it implemented. So for me, it's actually all positives. There's just quite a lot of work to still be done.
Has anybody said the positives? What have you really gained? What does the future hold?
You're asking me? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was asking the everybody on the Zoom here.
I mean, I don't mind talking about.
Amanda.
Go ahead.
Amanda.
So I work for Aon, which I don't know if many of you know, were one of the very early adopters of hot desking. And we don't have desks. I have a laptop. I worked from home. Initially, it was 1 day a week, went to 2, and it was basically whenever I needed to. So they've always afforded that flexibility. So definitely can wholeheartedly say, you know, Aon, great for flexibility. Where I think the issues lie with things like that is defining it. You know, going back to what you said earlier, it's all well and good having the flexibility. You know, I have 2 young children, both of which do have additional needs. So I do have to do school meetings, etc., like that. But I always feel, and whether this is personal, and I need to stop this myself, I'm making a conscious effort, is I need to make that time up. Or, you know, if I do the school run every day now, which is great. But again, I feel I'm the one that's, you know, I was logging in 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night at one point. So I think definitely set boundaries. So I now won't let anybody put a meeting in after 5 o'clock. It's just not allowed. You know, if you want to call me, it's got to be really urgent because I want to stop to do dinner. If I then need to check my emails later and finish something up, I'll come back and do that. But I'm doing that as an adult. And I think there's very clear messages that certainly collectively, obviously women, we need to give, and we need to not fear the repercussions. There shouldn't be any repercussions because at the end of the day, your contract does generally say, you know, 9 till 5, 5 days a week, ad hoc as and when necessary, not necessarily every day.
Yeah.
So I think I've definitely, you know, I'm a career returner. I was out of the workforce for about 4 years. I've come back with a very different mindset, and I still go back to my old way of thinking. But very quickly, I'm like, hold on, give myself a kick up the backside. No, that's not how it's going to work. So certainly for the ladies that are looking to return to the workforce, I can honestly say there are brilliant employers out there. You do need to weed through the ones that aren't very good. Glassdoor will become your best friend. They are mostly honest reviews. And find the people on LinkedIn, speak to them at the company. I would absolutely go back to somebody that cold called me off of LinkedIn and said, can you tell me your experience? What do you see as a working parent? That's the best way to get a feeling. That's my 2 pence worth.
Amanda, thank you. Aon, you say, you know, Aon have been doing this for years. Some of the things that people worry about, you know, in implementing this hybrid model is, you know, culture, teamwork, bringing younger people on and through the ranks. What's your thoughts on that and how that's worked or not worked at Aon?
I think there's still a long way to go, and certainly we're obviously, you know, going to be moving to an even more of a working from home force than before. Just seeing results from surveys, you know, there is a general shift to more days from home from men and women. And I know guys that don't have children, that haven't got children, but don't want to be in the office anymore. You know, they're at that stage of their career. They don't need to be there, which is, you know, it's what it's about really, isn't it? I certainly think for my experience, so I was promoted this year, last year rather, and I would say you need to become more visible. You need to speak out in meetings, let people know that you're there and you've got an opinion, because whilst you're not physically in the office, that's obviously more difficult. I think what Aon's doing really well is they are moving towards sort of smaller town halls where you go into little breakout rooms and you will discuss what's just been discussed on that. And that, again, that gets your face known. They do inductions for graduates as well. So often I'll have a graduate put a meeting in my diary. Consulting side, I work in asset management, but consulting side, and I'll give them a little bit of talk about, you know, what I do, who I am, and find out about who they are and what they want to do. And it's not everywhere in Aon, but that's certainly the thing that I try to portray anyway, sort of this collaborative, you know, accepting business.
I'm sure Deborah's got some questions for you. I've got one more, if I may. How much HR can put a policy in place, but actually so much of that depends, the implementation of that policy depends on your manager. And then the benefit of getting the benefit of it depends on you as an individual. How do you see different managers with Aon implementing the policy in different ways? And you mentioned in your talk there is actually your own discipline and standing up and saying, you know, I've done my hours, I've done my time, and not ending up living at work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a definite good point to end on. I absolutely advocate, you know, I don't work for Goldman's, you know, I'm not the first one there, the last one out. I think that mentality does need to change. And it will only change by people changing. A company is not going to make that change for you. But yeah, there's definite differences depending on who your line manager is. An example I can give, you know, you're working from home days a Monday, you've been on holiday the week before. I know one particular line manager likes to have you in the office on that Monday, regardless. So there are differences. My manager is absolutely great and is really flexible. But again, you know, it is dependent. However, working from home one day a week is written into your contract. So there's certain things that HR can put in there, and then your actual line manager can afford you even more flexibility as kind of a off contract thing. So, you know, if I've got, when we were doing school Christmas plays, I would work from home that day. I might have been working from home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that week, but that's fine. Because I'm adult enough to do my work. And I think that's where it comes down to. People need to, or line managers certainly need to stop treating people like children. That's not good management. We're adults, we're in an adult workplace, you know, have that confidence. If you haven't got that confidence in your worker, you shouldn't have employed them.
I totally. Deborah, do you want to make some comments on that?
Well, I mean, just all very, very, very good points, Amanda, and really interesting to hear you talk. And a couple of things I just pick up on are contracted hours. You know, one of the things that's not really being talked about in all of this flexibility, the new flexible world, is part-time hours. And so it's a lot about, when people are talking about flexibility, they're talking about flexibility around where you work, but they're still in the main talking about full-time. And what we know is there's a massive proportion of people who don't actually want to work full-time. And what we see, as Mark alluded to earlier, you know, you often get people who are on part-time contracts but end up working full-time. They're just not paid full-time hours. So for me, I think it's a hangover where people are scared to sort of say, well, actually, do you know what? And this is for full-time workers too. We did a survey, you know, a sort of finger in the air survey with some senior managers at a bank, actually, and they worked out, they totted up all the hours they worked outside their contracted hours, and they realised they actually worked their 5 weeks holiday and gave the company another 2 weeks. So when you actually look at it like that, it's not really a part-time issue. It's not actually a female issue. It's an employee issue where actually people need to feel stronger about saying, I appreciate I might sometimes have to work beyond the 37 and a half or 40-hour week I'm contracted to, but actually my job design is wrong. I'm frequently having to work 50 hours or 55 hours. And I actually think if everybody could, feel okay saying that, and of course people don't, because they think they're going to look weak or be looked down upon by their manager or overlooked for a promotion. I know why people don't, but if we could find a way to do that, actually, I think it would help everybody. As you were saying, be strong about saying, actually, no, I've done my hours and that time is blocked now to do something else. So that was my thing on contracted hours. And the other thing was about you feeling you need to make up the hours. It's a very female thing. Sorry, Mark, and any other chaps, but it is a very female thing. It falls in that same category of women don't really like asking for promotion. They don't really negotiate very hard on salaries when they're being recruited. And I see that every day. I see it. And you are absolutely right. The advice is big girls' pants. That's what I say to candidates. If you don't ask, you don't get. And actually, as long as you do it in the right way, you are respected for it. So, yeah, really good point, Samantha. Thank you.
And could I make a couple of comments? It's not particularly about the pandemic, but I'm not working at the moment, but I've worked for international companies where I maybe managed teams or had managers who were in other countries and in different time zones. And one of the, one boss was in Singapore and she wanted a call every Monday morning at 7. Well, there's no way I could get to London for 7 o'clock. And it was no problem having the meeting at 7, except when you log on at 5 to 7 and she's cancelled it. And it completely. So I think one of the things that I would suggest people could do is block out, if you know you're starting 2 hours earlier because someone wants a meeting, block out an hour and a half for lunch. Or make sure, just block it in the calendar so that people can't contact you. If you do instant messaging, go offline so that someone can't instant message you. Adjust your calendar so that people, I know it's not easy if someone's organising a big meeting, but that you can try and control that. It's really important to go for a walk around the block. If you start at 7 a.m, you must get some fresh air. And it's being really, really strict with yourself, which I think is what people have been saying. But don't be frightened to take 2 hours out because you started at 7 o'clock. Just don't feel bad about that. And especially if you then have to have a meeting at 6 o'clock at night, take breaks in the middle of the day, block that half an hour out to do whatever you want to do. And I also, another comment, I find it strange that everybody always wants to see everybody. Why do you have to see everyone and to see what room they're in? Maybe people need to learn how to talk and build relationships without actually seeing. I know seeing is great, of course it's great, but maybe also look at, you don't have to see people.
Patricia, thank you for that. I love your background.
You can see where I'd rather be.
Yeah, and so I have to disagree with you here. I miss seeing people. I miss seeing them in person. It's not the same when you're talking when somebody hasn't got their camera on. I think cameras.
Well, I think that's interesting, and I like to see people, and of course we'd all like to be meeting and not doing it technologically, but maybe it's because I'm so old that when I used to work with, my customers were overseas and I was in this country, you know, in some parts in Eastern Europe, you couldn't even get a phone connection. So so you had to, in a language you were not familiar with, and they didn't speak English well, you had to build a relationship and you couldn't see one another. So you're drawing on different skills to build the relationship. So that's all I'm saying, that, you know, there are more skills in the toolbox, and maybe you need to use those a bit more.
Patricia, thank you. Thank you. And great to see. Great to see you. Deborah, so we have a few minutes left before our 1 o'clock close. Are there, in terms of 10-2 and 9 to 5, should we and do we have an opportunity now to stop talking about time for a lot of roles and start talking about expectations and output?
Yes, I would love to say yes. And I think the current situation allows us to start having those conversations. So back to Amanda's point about, we're grown-ups, we can manage our own workload, we can deliver against objectives. What that comes back to is really good job design and really good setting of objectives. Because if everybody had really clear objectives and their job design was designed for the number of hours they are contracted to work, you don't need anything more than that. In my experience, what you find is that's often not the case. Objectives are set annually, they're not reviewed, they're often very woolly. So it's part of that journey we talked about earlier, which is to get to the point where actually everybody's comfortable, that both employer and employee, within that is job design and good objectives and good management, which requires quite a lot of new thinking.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm also, we haven't really given you the opportunity. There are obviously people on the call here who are looking for flexible and agile working, maybe 10 to 2 or maybe 9 till 3 or whatever. Tell us a bit more about 10 to 2 before we go.
Sure. I mean, we're a small niche agency. Our specialism is flexibility. So as long as a role's got some element of flexibility, whether that be full-time remote or 8 hours a week, we will work on it. We work in the southeast of England, and we do all sectors, all roles. So sort of from senior administration all the way through to actually non-exec directors. And in terms of the most popular things we see when we're having that part-time discussion is that businesses are, depending on the job, it tends to be driven by what the requirements of the role are, but the most popular formats are 5 short days or 4 short days or 3 full days. So you sort of end up with that 25 hours a week tends to be about the norm for the types of roles we work on. But again, it's very varied because it's all sectors. It can be, a 100K role one week and then a 40K role another week. So if anybody is looking, and particularly if you're looking for a job change, because I know most people here probably finance background, but by all means register on our website, TEN2TWO.org.
Is that TEN?
Number 2, TWO.
Yeah. So again, go on.
So TEN2TWO.org. So TEN, the number 2, TWO.org.
There you go. Deborah, thank you. We've actually used you guys in the past when we're looking for people to join our team, and I know your service and your team are absolutely fantastic. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant. It's been
my pleasure.
I'm sure if you want to, you'll be more than welcome to come back at any time, or indeed come and join these coffee calls with us. They're as you've now seen them, you know what they're like.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it will be good to have you back. Deborah, thank you very much. Everybody, it's lovely to see you again this week. Next week, Katie, we are talking about gender pay gap, I think.
Yeah, we're joined by Jack. He's a university graduate doing his master's. I think Nolly, actually, is Nolly still here? Or she dropped off? I think it was Nolly, one of our members, that made the introduction. He's doing some incredible research. So he's come and share his findings and give you all a bit of education, I guess, because he's learning a lot more than I am, especially.
Katie, thank you. Deborah, thank you. Look forward to seeing everybody next week. Have a great week. E2W are here for you if you ever want to have a chat.